This episode is brought to you by John Blake Sales Breakthrough Solutions, helping you to at least double the amount of leads that you get that convert into paying clients.
Welcome to the Master Dealmakers Secrets Podcast. And now, here's sales growth strategist, John Blake.
All right, I am particularly excited today. We have got Eli Wilde with us. Eli is the creator of Wilde Influence and was the top performing corporate trainer for Tony Robbins, amongst a whole stack of other things that he's been up to over the last 20 or so years. He's been in sales. He's worked for thousands. We've worked with thousands of people to transform their lives and businesses, focused primarily on sales, influence, impact, and communicating your message. I'm sure Eli can build on that intro that I just gave you. But welcome, mate. Really looking forward to our chat today.
Likewise, brother. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, good. So I was going to ask you, you at one point you were an actor. So obviously, you know, I've done some of your training myself. I've seen a whole bunch of your presentations. I know that at one point you were an actor. What drew you away from acting and into sales originally?
Well, you know, it's long story, very short. I moved to LA. I'll make it as short as possible. And I got my first sales job selling dental products over the phone. I got that job through a relationship with a girl. I dated a girl and it was her friend, worked at this company. I got the job. I sucked. And so I was always looking for kind of that edge. You know, I read Think and Grow Rich. I read all these books on mindset, psychology, scripting, sales. And I still pretty much sucked. But I was a likable guy, but I really actually sucked at the sales interaction. And around that time, through this girl also, one of her best friends was managing Tom Welling, who was Superman on a TV show called Smallville. And they had around 2004 is when that movie came out, Superman Returns, I think it was called. Yep. They turned down his guy. They thought he was a shoo-in for it. And because we had a relationship, he said, I think you'd be great for it. You have the look. Let's see if you can act. So they trained me for it for months. And, you know, I didn't get it. But looking back on it, I didn't go 1,000% all in. And after I didn't get it, you know, it was kind of a little bit wonky. It was between me and like two other guys. But then they said, this is where you put your foot on the gas. This is where you go all in. And I did the opposite of that. Because like, well, what if it doesn't work out? I started to kind of backtrack. And so I gave up the acting thing. And I go back to my job and I'm doing well there. I finally get to a place where I am good at sales because I just put all of my time and energy into that because my livelihood, I had this dream of doing this thing, acting, because it was like, I thought that'd be pretty cool as a kid. But then, you know, I get back into the sales and I do well. Going also side of my dream. And as I was digging into all the psychology books, I find NLP. Somebody mentions Tony Robbins. I'm like, who's Tony Robbins? I go crazy when I hear Tony Robbins' voice in CDs and just how he is. I was like, this guy has no script. This guy is authentic. He's doing the thing. Like whatever this guy has, like I want to find out, like, is he real? Is this all fake? And then I saw him at an event and it was so powerful for me. I went all in and he said some things that really shifted me. And I look back on that acting experience with that mindset, I would have got it. So very long story short, I started working, I harassed Tony's company. I used the mindset principles to get the job there. I called his company about 200 times in a period of 2 weeks. Wow. And I was persistent. I was funny. I was certain. I was, you know, it was all the things to be influential. I get the job. And after a few years, I was working with Tony and I was doing well. We would travel and promote Tony's events. So we'd live in LA for a few months, New York for a few months, Florida for a few months, Chicago for a few months. And I traveled like that for a few years. And then we come around after a few years, I'm back in LA, back where I live. So I was on the road for 50 weeks a year. And now I find myself back in LA. And now I'm thinking with the confidence and communication skills, and I know what to look for now, could I make it? So I get back into the acting gig. And I started booking a lot of things. It starts going really well, but I wasn't taking care of my health. Ended up burning out my adrenals. I got Epstein-Barr, which is like advanced mono. I spent months in bed, went from being like a fitness model on a billboard in Times Square to getting really sick, going through all of my money, being super depressed. And in that place, when I was at rock bottom, Tony Robbins' brother, one of my best friends, Scott Humphrey, his brother-in-law, I should say, calls me just to check in how I was doing. And I was like, terrible. He's like, come back, get involved, get your mindset right. But they could even see that I was like not the same Eli because I was sick and everything. So we waited a couple of months for me to get healthy. They told me I should be back in that environment and start selling, start actually making money. So I went back into the sales thing. But the unique thing this time was not only was I better, I had acting experience and all that. So I was better on my own. But because I was sick, and I had a relationship with Tony's wife, he calls her Sage, but his Bonnie Pearl's her name. And Scott, Tony, and them, they all gave me a lot of personal coaching. I got coaching from Tony, interactions, like kind of how to shift my lifestyle, my mindset, my communication. Because I had gone from like the significance of being like almost famous and being an actor. And now I don't have people wanting to get their picture taken me. I'm just a sales guy. He's like, and he said some things to me that really shifted it. Shifted who I was, what it meant to do these sales calls, do these interactions, and have the sense of mission and purpose. And he coached me for, better part of a year. 2010 is when I came back to his company officially. I worked half the week for Tony and laid in bed or a hospital bed the other half the week for that entire year. So this was like it. All my human interaction, people was like selling them. And so I wanted to make the most of it. And so I kind of fell back into the speaking, going from like acting, speaking, and the sales thing is just kind of what took off for me. And being a part of what I was doing really shifted it. And in some of those interactions that I had with Tony, even about acting, and he's coached like every famous person you can think of. He said some things to me that kind of shifted my perception of the glorification of being famous, or being an actor, I should say. You have these people as actors who are some of the most emotionally unstable people in the world, not all, and they make their living reading other people's scripts. They're famous. They get all the acknowledgement for saying words and communicating things that their agent told them to say, or written words on a script with the high emotion. And so it's like we put these people on a pedestal, but outside of what we see, the edited version of what we see, a lot of these people's lives are a mess. And he's like, and you could do that, but this is what's real, dealing with people. And so it just made me, I still love movies. I still love actors and all of that. And some, there's some that are like really like Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad, like I love these guys. They're actually good actors, good humans for the best I know. I don't know them personally. I've talked to both of them, but not like, we're not friends. I don't know their life. But at the same time, it was just like looking back at Tony, this guy's real. All of I thought all the significance and fame that I would get from being an actor, I really just wanted people to respect me enough because I was famous so they would listen to me. Like if Oprah said something, gave you some advice, you probably take it because it's Oprah. But if a bum on the street said the same words to you, you probably wouldn't take it. So it's not the advice, it's the person. And trying to be famous so I can just be the person is a long way about it. Like, why don't I just be the person? In order to be the person, I've got to learn how to effectively communicate in a way that emotionally moves the masses. And so I get to do that through speaking and selling, and I find it very rewarding. So short version, there you go.
I love that. Awesome. So in an alternative reality, you could have been Superman.
Yeah. It's, and now I'm 45 years old. So I was 23, 24 back when I had a lot of those opportunities. And, it's, an alternate reality. And some people, even when I go out somewhere, if I go to LA, people think I'm an actor, and so I kind of have a little bit of that thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Awesome. So look, and actually one thing I was going to clarify. So was the majority of the stuff that you did for Tony selling from the stage or selling one-on-one?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So the job that I had for Tony was the same job that Tony had for Jim Rohn. So going around to companies, doing a group presentation. So yes, a one-to-many front of stage offer. But when Jim Rohn, internet marketing wasn't what it is today. There was no internet. And then when Tony did it, in his company, 2005, there was no social media. So really, I was the marketer, I was the speaker, I was the salesperson. So I would find places to get myself in to speak. So I was like my own PR person. I would get myself in, I would sell from stage, and a lot of those people didn't buy, but I get their contact information, they had a sign-in sheet, even in a company.
You then follow them up.
Yeah. So it's kind of like like all of it, I'm the marketing, the promoting, the follow-up, it's just kind of all of it yourself. And for any entrepreneur, it's not the easiest path, but that's the path that Tony did.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, here's how you get good quick, and this is your income. And it's like, it's all you. And for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs out there, I got to post on Facebook, I got to write emails, I got to sell to people, I got to deliver. You're like, this is a lot of shit.
Wow.
And so,
yeah, you were his army of one, pretty much.
yeah. And there was, there'd be about a dozen of us at a time, all with the same job in the same city. And so we're kind of competing against each other, getting referrals into companies, leveraging key people of influence in each city to get booked onto other stages, and the process repeated. And then when you get really good, like I got good after a while, and I saw the need for a system. So I would even hire people out of my own pay. The company didn't provide this, but I'd hire people to do my paperwork, write my emails, just say this, all of that, got an assistant. And so I, kind of built it myself. But as far as the sales stuff, it was both. But primarily, ideally, I'd like to say mostly one to many, but a lot of people don't buy that way. So it ended up being one to one, or somebody that owned a big company. In order to get into the company, I had to sit down with him one-on-one and sell him on why he let me sell his company, something that, he didn't care about. So, yeah, so kind of both.
Wow. So you would have, that would have been right into the deep end. And I know he probably did a lot of training with you guys as well, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you would have learned on the fly for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's an inside sales department in the company. They call them PARs, personal account reps, and they would follow up, maintain relationships. So we were kind of the lead, the speakers, and then some of those people would follow up. But if it was my income, I'd do a lot of that follow up too. Tony Robbins at the big event, a lot of my people would come to Tony Robbins, Unleash the Power Within, thousands of people, and then he would pitch them Mastery University, a 5-figure offer. And so I follow up with a lot of those people too, to get those people. So, and then on the weekends, I was often going to other companies, reviewing other speakers, because I got pretty good within a few years. I was pretty good, and helping them with the back of room sales, which is another beast. Like, how do you sell at the back of the room and not just be an order taker? Sometimes it's pulling people out of the room. So there's systems to every form of sales in the self-development or coaching industry, people doing events, putting them on, the speaking, the selling, the back of the room, the follow-up, the calls, before and after. It's a lot to kind of manage.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, because there's some situations where you want everyone to run to the back of the room and sign up. There's others where you want to close them into a one-on-one with someone else. Like, yeah, there's all sorts of different outcomes that you're looking to create.
Yeah. Yeah. And so ideally the way to do it at scale is the speaking, which I love. Tony Robbins pitches like an $85,000 offer from stage on one of the days. But because of who he is, people run to the back for that. But that's probably not going to work for most people, because they don't have the brand credibility. Also, they're not Tony Robbins on stage. He's pretty good, and he attracts an affluent audience, somewhat. There's obviously not everybody there is a millionaire, but he's got that credibility now. Again, a lot harder 20 years ago, a lot harder 15 years ago. Now it's much easier with social media and targeting and all of that. And that's how Tony's really blown up. But it's really about understanding what influences people, which is a lot of the human needs stuff that I draw on, framing and all of that. And it is best even today, if somebody have seen not a seminar, gone to a seminar and been sold, that's great. But sometimes it's a webinar, a presentation, a VSL. There's got to be something to stimulate people to want to start going into the buying syntax. A sales call, like something has to generate their interest and their desire to fuel up the emotion enough to push them through. And now we coach on both the sales stuff, but also the speaking stuff. Because for a lot of entrepreneurs, they're like, my salespeople suck. And I'm like, well, let's see your assets. And I say, well, it's because you suck on camera. You're all over the place in your reels, in your seminar or whatever, and you're making it harder for your salespeople because you're not powerful on stage. And so we had the benefit. I was selling for a guy who I think is the best on stage, and that made it easier. And then other people, when they try to do that, they're not that good on stage. So sometimes their process doesn't need to be better, but sometimes they need to get better and make it easier for the salespeople as well. So it's really about understanding influence, like what influences people, getting them to build that trust.
So when you do your sales process audits, is that the biggest disconnect or the opportunity that you find to increase sales? Like the stimulus that gets them into the conversation, or is it normally something else that you notice that causes the disconnect?
Well, a lot of times, there's so many things, and I'm actually writing something right now on this. A lot of times it's the belief and certainty of the salesperson, and that's going to happen to anybody. Even for me, like at Tony Robbins' event, you can go, and on the second day, if you don't love it, you can get your money back. And it's no benefit to me, but on the second day of the event, there'd be a customer service line with a lot of people that didn't like the event. It's cold. Tony's cussing a lot, whatever. They want to leave and get their money back. And I was there, no money in my pocket, but I was turning around best I could those people, asking them what made them want to come in the first place, like finding that initial desire to go deep in. And so I got a lot of reps, even when it meant no money to me. And I turned a lot around a lot of those people that ended up changing their life. But here's where I always bring this up to people. Tony Robbins, I think, is the best, but do some people not like it? Do people want their money back? Do some people not get results? Yes. And I was getting the blunt force of that, people yelling at me, angry with me. If I brought that uncertainty, if I brought that experience into my next call, I'm going to be less effective. And so, it's the mindset, it's the psychology, it's the conviction, it's the certainty. Number one, it's the questions and the frames. Number two, like all the stuff that you're seeing is like a basic syntax. And then it's like really the capacity to be able to get people through the levels of conversation that we talk about: surface, action level, transformation level. Like, how do we build this context or this environment that you and I are not on a sales call? We're having a deep and honest conversation about your situation and what you actually want.
Yeah.
And so I hear a lot of that in these calls when people have scripts, or they're going through it, or they're new and they're uncertain in what they're saying, and they've got some script that's not in their language, so it feels inauthentic, or they're getting resistance by a prospect being direct with them, asking questions, and they start to contract. They have fear. They start stumbling and muttering, so that they start apologizing, or they start being combative. And so a lot of times there's just the energy exchange between these humans in a conversation that needs to be neutralized in some way, so that the salesperson can even communicate and think clearly. Otherwise, it's a mess.
Yeah. I a couple of things that you've said, like the certainty. Like, so I've worked with a lot of sales teams, probably been doing this, similar amount of time as what you have. And one of the things that I've noticed is that if they don't have a belief around the value of what they sell, it becomes really difficult for them to be able to sell it to anyone else. It's like that whole thing: you can't give away what you don't already have.
Yeah. It's
and people that sell a product, and they wouldn't ever spend the amount that somebody that they're talking to, they're suggesting should, and then they wonder why they're not actually making any sales. So the certainty thing is massive.
It's huge, and something that I teach, especially for the speaking. It's like, before you go to interact with another human being, you must be like so sold in your heart of hearts that this is the right thing, that this is valuable. And will it be valuable for that person? Maybe, if they have a problem, but maybe not. And so also, just as powerful as certainty and conviction, which is what you have to have, whether that's reading over testimonials, having them around your desk, like reinforcing in your mind, your subconscious, that what I have is valuable and helps people. So that could be something in your morning formula, like something you look at every morning, kind of a routine of something you read to build and condition belief within yourself, like what you have, that you're valuable as a person, you're valuable, like the offer is valuable, the offer helps people. But just as powerful, I think, as certainty and conviction, we have the best thing. It's often not contextual. Like, if somebody just gives you advice without knowing your situation, well, that can't be good advice, because it's kind of like a one-liner, that people post a meme of on Instagram. It's not going to land unless we provide, the proper context. And so, just as important as the certainty is, another C word is curiosity. And it's just, so I'm certain in myself, or I'm bulletproof here, but I'm genuinely curious about this person. And, even after all the bajillions of sales interactions I've had, I'm genuinely curious about people. If somebody's being like a douchebag to me and just being really combative, I wouldn't call them a name. I'd just be like, yeah, I'm just curious. What makes you say that? Or I'm like, well, we just talked. I I can tell you've got a lot of balls to be able to say that to me. Wow. It's like, I'm curious, it's like, did you start out that way? Have you always been that way? Did you just give it straight, or, but I'm genuinely curious. And so it's not combative for me. And then sometimes they'll still be resistant, but I'm just genuinely curious. So I'm present. And I think being present is so rare these days, that somebody's like owns themselves, their certainty and their conviction attached to themselves, their belief in themselves, who they are, their purpose, and the certainty and connection that they can bring to a conversation with a curiosity where they create that safe space. And so because it's rare, and if you're genuinely concerned and you really believe you can help somebody, I think that's about half the battle right there.
Yeah, when you talk about being genuine and sincere, I often hear myself saying the same things over and over to different clients, and I say that the best thing about being genuine and being sincere is also the worst thing about being genuine and sincere, and is that that you can't fake it.
Yeah,
it's like genuine sincerity can't be faked. It's like, and so if you're coming from that genuine place, it's very difficult for somebody to call you on that. One of the things that you talk about, which I think is super powerful, is the dancing analogy, where it's important to be cognizant and understand the steps, but just as, if not more important, is staying connected to your partner. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's I heard this analogy a long time related to something else. I won't go on that rabbit hole, but when you learn to dance, when you first start dancing, you see other people dancing, so you want to get involved, but you're all over the place, waving your hands like you don't care. Somebody says, here's the basic steps of the salsa, the merengue, the cha-cha. You learn the basic steps, but then you see that dude or that girl on the dance floor spinning and flipping and, doing all the crazy stuff. And what they don't notice is, even though they're doing crazy stuff and it looks really fancy, they still land on beat and they have these basic steps. Some people start doing the crazy stuff before they've mastered the steps. And so first you want to practice in private, like here's the syntax. And then, once you have got a good understanding of that, now how to move with a partner, feel when she wants to dip or all of this stuff, and then begin to lead the partner. So it's like mastering the steps and not making it about how good you look. How well can I spin you, make you feel like, just nudge and make you feel safe enough to lead. Like, all right, I'm going to spin you this way. It's like, and just that interaction that you can watch. If you've ever done any salsa, I'm not a great dancer, but I have danced. And, it's like, you can feel when the person trusts you, when you're being led, and that's going to happen. And, it's something that you have to get enough reps with to ultimately go on feel. And just like an Olympic athlete, when you're starting out in sales or starting out and working out, first you're doing toe raises and bench press all in the same workout. Somebody's like, no, push day, pull day, leg day. Like, here's a system to it. So you have some rest. Like, okay, 5 sets of 5, 10 sets of 10. Like, you get a system, proteins, fats, carbs. And like, okay, that's better. But then when you look at the Olympic athlete, people at the peak, they might say, well, I was supposed to do 10 reps or 10 sets today or 10 sprints, but I'm a little tight. I'm going to go on feel. I'm going to back off a little bit. Or today I'm feeling good. I'm going to push it a little bit harder. And so they're able to go on feel, but they only get to that level of unconscious competence, or what we call post-conventional wisdom, where they've really got enough reps to be able to feel into what's happening. And a lot of times without those reps, if we just become authentic and go purely on feel in the beginning, our feelings can misguide us. The feeling of fear and uncertainty, because we haven't mastered the steps, can keep us from being strong and leading when we need to, because there's an opportunity there. Like, if we know the steps and we know the process and we're in it enough, then we can lead and we can go on feel. Like, here's where I really get to challenge this person, or this person's being like that. Well, hey, I'm not sure. What do you think? And so and the tonality will change and all of that, but it's feeling into the other person. And that's the higher level. I think you can get there faster if you know what to look for. Because you're going to make some wrong moves, some missteps. You're going to step on your partner's toes every now and then. They're going to step on yours. Totally fine. Can't beat yourself up. You just got to go back into the rhythm. And that happens in all communication, I think.
Yeah, I've noticed, because I listen to, probably similar to you, listen to hundreds of calls when I'm coaching, and you see people just get too locked into process and they miss things. And even to, to a point, one thing that I discovered years ago is if you're talking to somebody and you sense a disconnect, it's like, rather than just march on, with the next step of the process, if you don't stop and say, hey, I'm sensing that something's changed for you or something shifted right then, would you mind sharing what that is? It's like, if you don't stop right there, that little thing will snowball. And by the time you get to the end of your, process, that they've checked out mentally, and they're just, they're so focused on whatever it was that was there. There's no way in the world that they're going to be interested in going ahead with you. So it's having that perception, but often, people get locked into that. I guess it's the left brain of, I've got to follow this syntax, and they become disconnected from the right brain, which is sensing what's going on in the person, staying connected to the partner, which is what I love about that analogy. I think it's awesome. And I see that as almost probably the biggest disconnect, is that they don't perceive what's actually going on in the other person. What do you, in your experience coaching so many hundreds of people, what else do you see as a disconnect, when people are trying to learn how to do this masterfully?
It's like,
a lot of people who listen to the podcast want to know what we do over at Master Dealmaker Secrets. And effectively what we do is we work with sales professionals and business owners all over the world who are seeing massive increases in their top line sales revenue. So we help business owners and sales professionals to effectively focus on the 3 key drivers to growing sales revenue in your business. The first one is controlling the message that you send out into the marketplace so that potential clients see and hear and read what you do as an opportunity as opposed to your competitors. The second thing that we do is we help you to create a direct path to the 20% of your ideal clients that will deliver 80% of the revenue. So everyone knows the 80-20 rule. We help you to develop a direct path to the 20% of the people that are going to give you 80% of your sales revenue in your business. And the third thing that we allow you to do, that we create a process for, is for you to be able to double the amount of leads that you get that convert into paying clients. So if this is of interest, we do have an application-only process to become involved in this particular program. And to get to there, all you need to do is to go to johnblakescall.com. So it's JOHNBLAKESCALL.com, and there's a couple of questions to answer there. And then what you'll do is get on a quick conversation with me, and I can find out a little bit more about what you've got going on in your business and see potentially whether what you are doing would be a fit for what we could help you with. And at that point, I can extend an invitation if it's a fit, and you can make the choice to come on board or not. So that's the opportunity. That would be the next step if you're looking at how you can take things to the next level. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on the podcast, if you're getting value from it, I invite you to do that, and I will look forward to talking to you. The website is www.johnblakescall.com. Talk to you soon.
It's like, even today we do a game called the question catch. And, a lot of times we'll ask a question, and people have a really great question. They'll ask it in the wrong way or at the wrong time, or they'll ask the perfect question, but they won't get the perfect response. And so questions are tools to elicit information. The goal isn't to ask the question, it's to get specific information. And that information should be tied to emotion. So we need to sometimes be able to rephrase or ask the question again several different ways. So you might ask the same question 3 times, 3 different ways to get an answer. And sometimes it's like, we think they're being difficult, but they don't have a script, and sometimes they don't know. And sometimes I've heard people on a sales call with, like, say, a new entrepreneur, like, what's the biggest challenge in your funnel? What's the biggest challenge with this? It's a really typical question. They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, if you don't know, like, what do you mean you don't know? And so it's like, well, it's like, it's kind of, if you didn't
know, what would have been?
Yeah, but, and they really don't. And so it's, like a self-selection question. Well, typically, when people, at the income level that you are, hop on a call like this, they're generally, starting to realize things aren't perfect with either this, or this, with their objection handling, maybe the control of the call, or possibly just really understanding how to make the offer. Which of those sounds most like it's kind of your situation right now that you might be having some challenges with? Oh, I'd say, it's probably that. Or I'd say it's all kind of a combination. I say, okay, what makes you say that? Now they said it, and they have to go deeper into why they said that. Okay, how's that showing up for you specifically? Like, where was there a time recently where that didn't go well? Tell me about that. So now we can drive into it, and they're going to go beneath, and they're going to have to go inside and recall that experience and, defend, if you will, why they said that. And even though in actuality they didn't say it, I said this, or this. So I said it. They just choose one, and then I say, what makes you say that? What's coming up for you that makes you think that that might not be the way that you're wanting it, might not be perfect, might be the bottleneck. And so then we've got a problem, and we can go into that.
Yeah, I love the neutral language around that as well. I call that the drop-down menu. It's like if you ask the question and they don't give you the answer, or they don't give you an answer that really allows you to go anywhere, it's like providing them with the drop-down menu. So that can be a big disconnect if people don't have the flexibility to be able to go in that direction.
Yeah, it's about having a level conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And also, the neutral language around, what is it that might be a problem there, rather than trying to arbitrarily, them feel like you're forcing them in a particular direction. It's like being neutral with the question so that they can feel like they're in control and take it where they want to go.
Yeah.
So, once someone's nailed their process, nailed their sales process, how do you suggest that they keep challenging themselves to keep it interesting? It was actually my wife that asked that question.
That's great.
She's a machine, right? So she's had this, she's in wellness, has a nutrition clinic. And up until recently, she'd pretty much done every single sales consultation, like a 45-minute sales consultation. And she converts between 70 and 80%. Obviously, She's had some help from me, but she's a really, really accomplished salesperson. But she's been doing it for 11 years, and she's also the business owner. So her question was, once you've got the process nailed, how do you keep it interesting? How do you keep challenging yourself and keep it interesting?
One, it's like, it's realizing for you, like, what this is, and it's never about you. Because I fell into this trap too. And I talked to Tony about it, because Tony, he'll do a 3-day seminar. It's like 50 hours. He's been doing the same seminar for 40 years. When you see Elton John or a really amazing singer, they want to play their new stuff. They want to keep it new and interesting, but they sing the song Aerosmith. They sing that song from 40 years ago like it's the first time, because they know that it's not about them, number one. And so it's a process. But for you, personally, without kind of messing up your flow, people, a business is a system that provides value like this, not to be a cog in the wheel, but to be genuinely interested in that person, realize that it's about them, number one. Number two, something that I do, and I'm always thinking of, and I was on a walk last night. We teach something for our speaking called the Trust Trinity, getting people to trust in you, in the process, but also in themselves. And so to get people really in what I call the buying pocket, or in that place where they realize that it's possible, but it's only possible with you. Like the analogies, and also to kind of self-select that they're the problem and they need help. So that place is a good place to put people in. And Robert Cialdini, the author of the book Influence, he said the most powerful tool you have for instant persuasion is the metaphor. And so always playing with different metaphors and using their language back to them, in different metaphors. And, a classic example is something like, well, you're playing checkers right now. What we're talking about is playing chess. You're moving at a pace on the board where you can only move one step at a time. but you're thinking tactically, not strategically. Like with chess, it's about knowing all the different moves of all the different players and how everything goes. It's about thinking strategically. But for a lot of entrepreneurs or salespeople or people like yourself, they realize that not only do they need to know all the ways that the pieces move, they need to understand their opponent. And the opponent for you, from what I'm hearing, I think you're going to be surprised one day to find that the opponent on the other side of the board isn't time, isn't money. You're going to find that when you really look in the eyes of that opponent, you've been looking in a mirror. Like you've been stopping yourself. Like where else? So we're starting to turn internal. So we can play with some of these metaphors. If I was on a call, I'd take some of their language and do it differently. But, some of these metaphors and, the law of the mirror and things like that, like we can play with some of these analogies and they provide perspective and belief change. And it's a lot of fun to see people get it.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I know that, in some of our other chats, you and I have had some, studied from the same people. And I'm curious, at what point, and I totally am a believer in the metaphors and the power of stories and all the rest of it. But at what point does the NLP thing just become weird? You know what I mean? Like I've heard people use, and I won't mention any names, but certain patterns and stuff. And on the other end of it, you hear it and you just go, that just doesn't sound right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's when people need to spend more time, I think, with the Milton Erickson, Richard Bandler, like he does these things and it's perfect. Tony Robbins does them and they're perfect. So a lot of times people, they know they're doing a technique, so that makes it weird right away. It feels inauthentic. And then they try these elaborate things, like so many presuppositions, something that will allow you to quickly and easily just find yourself taking the action that deep down you need to. And I can't tell you what you need to do.
And the weird pauses.
Yeah. And so it just becomes a little bit awkward. But it's like, even so, to make it more conversational for people, because I do this a lot of times, and you could say something like, even now, as you're listening. So that's a pacing statement, as you're listening to me. It's like, you might begin to realize, and I'm gonna tell you something to realize, but it's like, even now as we're having a talk, we're doing this podcast, I start thinking of things that I can get better at. And, you might be thinking about some of those things too. It could be this, and this. So I'm just curious. So I'm doing it all the time too, just like all those weirdos, but I do it in a conversational way where it's smooth. And I think some of those folks, the belief that they're doing a technique and it should work, it's never the thing. We can't lose the sense of the connection, but if you really have the connection and the trust and a little bit of flow, it's amazing what you can get away with. Confusion patterns and all of that. And it gets quite technical when folks are actually good. Chase Hughes, brilliant, and has used this to like infiltrate other governments. It's like it works when people are really good, but a lot of people they're just not very smooth at it. And that's why their intention in going into NLP is so they can get a technique. So their whole context for why they're doing it, to manipulate or to be smart or to do something tricky, it's a tool that can't be used in that way. Otherwise it's going to backfire. But it does work when used properly.
Yeah. One of the other things I was going to ask you, obviously Tony Robbins has been a massive influence on you to get you where you are. Aside from Tony, who else has been a really big influence to get you where you are today?
That's a good one. For me, and this is the last few years, I've studied so many people and just had access to so much. It's interesting as I started to peel back and be open to other trainers, because I sold Tony and I think Tony's the best, but I was selling the belief that Tony was the best. And so I needed to be able to believe it. And so I just thought everybody else sucked, but there is a lot of other great people out there as well. There's a guy that we work with on our team now named Michael Oliver. So back when I started doing sales coaching, we had an agency and all of that. I got through Jeremy Minor stuff, and I coached a company where Jeremy had sold, and I got all the scripts, and I saw the kind of the stuff that Jeremy teaches, priming questions, all of that. And then somebody said, well, that's actually this guy, Michael Oliver. All of that stuff, all those questions, connecting, background, probing, consequence questions, all of that was Michael Oliver. So I got my hands on lots of these custom scripts, and I would go into companies like a salesforce.com where Tony was coaching, and I got to actually, coach a lot of the people there too. So I would go in, but I would ask all these companies for their script. Okay, and then I would ask some of the managers, like, why do they say it that way? Why this? How's that landing? And so really, it's been the culmination of other sales trainers, a lot of them in the corporate world, not just high ticket, but why is their syntax set up the way that it is? Why do they ask the questions? Even on like an intake form or a survey, what is the context, the reason for it? So really looking at brilliant copywriters also. John Benson, I think he's brilliant.
I've studied some of his stuff.
Yeah, another guy that I don't study very many people these days, but there's a guy that I love, similar to what I do, but he does webinars, named Jason Fladlien. He wrote a book called One to Many. So he's done 9
I've got that book. Yeah.
It's brilliant. I think they could charge, a lot more for that book. It's great. And he doesn't really refer to NLP much, but it's NLP is what he's doing, but he's doing it well. And he understands just, about 24 basic frames. Like we teach the same ones, but he's just doing them over and over again. And it's really cool. So he's been great to learn from. And I just emailed him yesterday actually. And they got back to me, but I've never talked to him personally. Trying to think of other people also, the teachings of Jim Rohn.
His stuff's amazing.
Yeah. And there's so much wisdom in that. Also studying Les Brown.
Yep.
Just a lot of the framing and storytelling that he would tell. And when I started working for Tony, there was a guy named Roberto Monaco that managed the team. He owns a company called Influenceology, where they help chiropractors like sell from stage basically. But he's very brilliant, and he's read anything related to influence, and he's one of my best friends. And so just seeing some of the frameworks that he did, those have been probably the biggest influences on me. But I'm constantly learning. Like I don't have any days where I don't consume something and create something.
Yep. So what's your number one motivation to keep doing this, as opposed to all the other opportunities that you must get thrown at you on a daily basis?
For me, and I'm going to say one kind of blanket thing, and then one thing that's like the real, but kind of airy fairy thing. I didn't grow up being good at sales. I was quietest kid in school, really introverted. Still, I spent a lot of time alone, but it just became a vehicle for me to change my own life. And I think that a lot of people say they don't like selling because one, they can be rejected. Two, they don't feel good enough about themselves to offer something to somebody where they could provide value because they don't believe in their own value. And so it's really seeing people make that shift in their certainty and their belief, where it's like, what I have to say is valuable enough to communicate that value and get somebody to hold themselves to a higher standard. And so really, at the end of the day, and I geek out on a lot of books like Power versus Force, Levels of Energy, books related to spiral dynamics and the evolution of our consciousness as human beings, like how we actually evolve.
Yeah,
and
it's fascinating.
Spiral, it takes you through like survival, tribal, leadership, systems, process, all of this. And when I see people wanting to be successful, they can read the script or go to the success seminar and still not have success because they lack structure, they lack power, they lack a sense of community, or their sense of survival is off, meaning they've had trauma where they don't feel safe in their own skin. Their survival cortisol is running through them. And so really through the process of teaching people how to communicate more effectively with themselves and other, it's my way of kind of helping to evolve human consciousness. And so that's kind of my, I don't say that in my trainings or anything, but really that's what we're up to. That's what it is for me. And I think that in order for somebody to do that, they need to feel safe. They need to feel like they have got a community of people. They've got to own their power. They've got to have some structure, which is level 4 in the spiral dynamics. And then success sits on top of that. And then from there, societally conscious, where they play a bigger game, become integrated. And then there's oneness, Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, like this higher level of consciousness. But a lot of people are going to these spiritual events or looking to change the world, but they don't feel safe. They don't have a sense of community. They don't have all of that. And I think everything that people want. It's on the other side of influence with themselves or others.
Yep.
And so to help people influence themselves and others in a way that is, mutually beneficial for the common good. Like that's really what I'm up to in my life and why I teach this. And so that's also the lens through which I see people when I interact with them. Where do they not feel safe? Where they have support? Where are they not owning their power? Where are they lacking structure? Because these are the foundation building blocks, according to spiral dynamics, on how this person can get success, but also evolve consciously as a human being for like the evolution of their soul. So no big deal. That's kind of what I do it. Just that. It sounds kind of very fairy, but there's enough scientific data to say that is the evolution of consciousness. And I think that communication with ourselves and others, that bridge, especially where we can be rejected and then fear comes up and all of that, like that's ultimately what we're doing. I'm trying to do my little part and make that process easier for people's souls.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really awesome way of thinking about it. Most definitely, that's brilliant. So with the, and obviously we're giving people tools, we're giving people belief, we're empowering people. What are the three? Because one of the things that I've started doing is finding salespeople for clients. I often find that they've recruited the wrong people. And it's nothing against the people that they've got. It's just that there are better people out there that they could have selected. What do you find are the three most probably biggest common denominators or personality traits that you notice with high performers?
Great question. And it's interesting. I got another very good friend, Cole Gordon. You probably know him. He went from he's just killing it. And he's one of my best friends. And so we talk, I spent 250 grand last year on different sales influence type training. He spent 600 grand, I think. So, and we bought programs together. We go anything sales, influence, business, if anything you could imagine, we have bought it. And every year I do this, and so does he. And so, in that process, we see a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of salespeople. What makes A players good? It's hard to make a C player into an A player. So some people, it's just it's just tough to change those people. And you've got to have, as a company owner, first of all, the right leadership and the right culture for people want to even be that. And as you have that, because we may make some mistakes, even inside of my course, we sold it through a webinar, did a JV deal with somebody, and we got a lot of the wrong people in my community for a while. People you're bringing down the vibe of everybody. And that's just in my coaching course, but in my company, the people got to be A players. So I think, and Jordan Belfort says this, people do need to have a certain amount of money motivation, which is true, like the desire to win. And I love this quote from Vince Lombardi, the winningest football coach in American football. He says, winning isn't everything. The will to win is. People that just want to win. They just love winning, and they're not shy about it. It's and not so they can, a little bit of ego, isn't that always a bad thing? To have your pride on the line. I want this, I want to be at the top. And so they have a strong desire to win. I always say super organized now. For me, I was never very organized as a salesperson, still not super organized, but I've got people that organize me. So just organization is key.
Yep.
My personal, I kind of fell through the cracks with that because I left a lot of money on the table. Fortunately, I made it up with hard work and talent. But good organization, follow-up process, systems, personal management is what I would say. And then another thing is just the ability to, you could say, get vulnerable or ask for help. A lot of times that side of the ego, I'm the best, that can be a double-edged sword, because then those people aren't asking for help and then they're not getting any better. So it's that need to grow. And it's interesting, these people that have that, and I know a lot of people talk about this, there's this huge desire to win. And this is in me too. It's a desire to win for myself and others. I want to be better so that I can help more people. But there's also in top performers I see, there's almost an insecurity. So that's why I have to fix things. I have to fix things. For me, in that drive, that insecurity actually always makes me want to get better. It's not good enough type thing. Maybe it's like I didn't get hugged enough as a kid or something like that. It's like that love, but this is how I feel valuable, and I don't feel valuable unless I'm digging into it. So it's, there's something there in people where they're asking for help, they're getting vulnerable, they want to win, and they have some structure. And so those things are really, really big.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, wanting to win, being organized and willing to ask for help, because yeah, you're right. Because I've seen it happen in organizations. There's this fine line between someone who's an incredibly high performer, but is so destructive within a team. Like they'll just explode, everything around them. So there's this balance between someone who's like an incredibly fantastic salesperson, gets results, but there's this balance between that and someone who's also a sociopath.
Yeah, that happens a lot. A lot of times too, the top person in a company, I go to a company, it's like that person's mindset, because everybody's scared of that person. Even the boss sometimes scared of that person.
Yeah, they get held to ransom, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times it's good to let those people go, or, have a real conversation like, hey, people look up to you. You're a leader here.
Yep.
And, you're not doing the work anymore. You're not showing up for the meetings because you're already good. What kind of example do you think that is for everybody else? Because they need that.
Yep.
Can you see how your behavior and not showing up is setting a standard for them where they feel like they don't? But do you think they need this? Yeah, they do. So you being this way, not showing up, is actually hurting their income. Is that what you want? I can't imagine that it is. And so it's, having that real conversation with those people oftentimes, or booting them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if, that guy, like if he's left to fester with, with that type, behavior, it can destroy businesses. I've seen that happen.
Yeah, it takes away from the tribe.
Yeah,
that effect, and they end up kind of running the show. They hold everybody hostage, just as you said, 100%.
Yeah. So, mate, I've really enjoyed today's conversation. I've got one last question for you. Obviously, the podcast is called Master Dealmaker Secrets. What is the biggest deal you've ever done in your career that you didn't think that you were going to get, that you got? And, what was it, I guess, that you learned or that was different on that particular day? I know you've had some big days selling from the stage. Could be that, or it could just be,
Yeah, we have a bunch of six-figure clients now, and it's more on the speaking side.
Yep.
And for me, they're people I didn't even make an offer to. They were just, and so I'm always, and yesterday I actually had a conversation with somebody that's kind of creating, for lack of better words, the Uber of sales.
Mm-hmm.
It's some interesting things that's happened. So as far as like a big deal, I don't know, but it's like now at this point, I'm kind of beating off deals with a stick, because the really big ones take a lot of my time. So the biggest deal to help me, market myself, I connected with Taylor Welch of Traffic and Funnels back a few years ago. And this is where a lot of people started to know me. They gave me an ownership stake in one of their companies, the Sales Mentor, and they just saw me present once. And, after that, a couple thousand people a month started going through my sales training. And that's why a lot of the industry knows me, because we've never done any actual marketing. But it was because of that. And, for me, it was just, everything I've done where there's been something, JVing with Tony on something or this or that, it's come from me just keeping my head down and be focused. And the opportunities came to me, which, positioned me really well. And so as far as like with the deals, now I'm in a place where I try to keep everything structured in a way where it's not because people want me in their company or something like that, but it's so much of my time. I try not to. I can think of several times where I presented at a really, really big company, and they were so moved by my talk, they ended up shutting down the company, and I sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on the spot through a presentation with Tony. That meant like 6 figures commission, because I closed an entire company, because I closed the boss, and he decided to send everybody. So I've had several times where that happened, where you close like 300 sales at once. And that was always, those deals always felt really good. And looking back on it, I just started to realize there was patterns in what I was doing. that position me in the right way. Empathy, certainty, value exchange, all of it, where not in a 3-month, call process, but one powerful conversation got 300 sales at once. And so I've had countless of those. So it'd be hard for me to pinpoint exactly one, but times where I just really showed up and brought it and sold everybody.
Awesome. Well, Eli, mate, I've really, really enjoyed the chat. I really appreciate you jumping on. I know it's early evening where you are. Is there any particular way that you would prefer people get involved or get in contact? Is there a resource that you'd recommend, a webinar, whatever it is that you think people should do to take the next step if they want to get in touch with you?
We just got the website done, wildinfluence.com.
Yeah, I checked it. It's awesome. Looks great.
Yeah, it is. A couple.
I liked your VSL too.
Yeah, just had that film. So we have some assets, and I'm almost done. By the time this podcast goes live, I've got kind of the structure of a 9-figure script. So fortunately for me, it's like in the position I am, every 8-figure bajillion, dollar company that's doing really well now, I'm friends with a lot of these people. They ask me to look at their script. And so there's consistent themes in every script that makes them good. So on the Y website, people can get that 9-figure like call structure framework and some of the context of what they need in addition to just the questions, sensory acuity, behavioral flexibility. So I have an explanation of like what really makes the call good and some notes on what you need around the call. So that'll be on the site here in a couple of days. And I just need somebody to make it look pretty and it'll be there.
Awesome. Well, look, I've learned a stack from you. I've, been investing in some of your programs myself. So, mate, it's been awesome to have you on and really appreciate you sharing what you've shared. And, mate, I will no doubt talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Eli.
Thanks so much for having me on, man.
You've been listening to Master Dealmaker Secrets with John Blake. Subscribe to get more in-depth strategies and maximize your sales process with new episodes every other week. And double your inquiry to sale conversion with the lead flow you already have. Go to johnblakeaudio.com for his exclusive, free, no fluff audio training and companion PDF guide.